Soul is Pixar's latest animated movie about a middle-aged band teacher who nearly dies right as he's about to get his big break in jazz. The movie stars Jamie Foxx as Joe Gardner and Tina Fey as 22, a soul who exists in the great before, waiting to get her spark in order to be sent down to Earth and start a life. The film was directed by Pete Docter, who is a big shot at Pixar, having directed Monsters, Inc., Up, and Inside Out, as well as writing several other Pixar films. Soul is a film that takes Pixar a bit out of its typical wheelhouse and attempts to conquer even larger existential concepts than Inside Out, but it doesn't quite stick the landing of the other Pixar greats. I'm Dennis, and this is my watch list. By no means am I saying this is some kind of Pixar flop. It's definitely a good movie, but at this point Pixar has come to represent great movies, especially great movies that just don't appeal to children, but a mass audience. If I was grading this on just being a kids movie, then it's out of this world, fantastic, a great movie to show kids. But as a film fan, and frankly a Pixar fan, somewhere along the line I began holding them to a higher standard, and while this film is good, it feels a bit underwhelming by the end. But we'll get to all that. First, I want to talk about the good stuff. Number one, above anything else, is the animation. Pixar has come a long way since Toy Story, and this movie really flexes that animation muscle. Typically, Pixar tackles non-human main characters or out-of-this-world superheroes, so just seeing an animated film about a middle-aged guy living in New York City may seem a little less fantastic, but the animation is beautiful. These are the best animated people that Pixar has ever done, hands down. The environments look great, the fabric of people's clothes look realistic, and the slight cartoonishness of the character models helps to elevate the atmosphere into a playful realism. Then the other half of the movie, set either in the stairway to the great beyond or the realm of the great before, also looks great. The environments are at their cartooniest, and the design of the souls looks good, if not a little generic, with some clear inspiration from their work on Inside Out. But the Jerrys and Terry in particular, these beings of the beyond, have such a fun abstract design. The way their arms move around without there being a back line to them, oof, I love it. They're so floppy and flimsy. It was a really cool design concept for these unknowable beings. Overall, this is probably Pixar's best animation to date. The voice acting is also pretty good in this movie. Jamie Foxx is excellent as Joe Gardner. Tina Fey is fine as 22. I don't think it was necessary to cast her in the role. It felt more like stunt casting to me, or that Tina Fey felt she needed to voice a Pixar character since Amy Poehler already did. She was good, but the character never screamed Tina Fey to me, and I felt she was just serviceable. And the plot of the film also took some twists and turns that I wasn't expecting. I'm not going to spoil anything past the first third of this movie, so don't worry. But from the trailers, I knew that Joe's soul was going to some afterlife land, but the concept of the great before where souls' personalities are created is a really fun one. Honestly, the concept is so interesting that I wish this movie spent more time fleshing out that realm than it did, especially the idea that some souls are mentored by figures of history into getting a spark, which is the final piece in their personality building before they can be sent to Earth. So, Joe Gardner is this middle school band teacher who feels he's kind of wasted his life since he wanted to be a great jazz pianist. He gets a rehearsal with a local band, and they allow him to join them for the next performance. Joe is so happy that he's cartoonishly walking through New York City, avoiding every kind of cartoon accident that he possibly can while talking on the phone until he falls down a sewer hole, then his little blue soul appears in the stairway of the great beyond. Joe tries to escape death and falls off the staircase into the great before, and is mistaken for another soul who is one of the mentors to the pre-life souls. It's here that Joe is assigned to be 22's mentor. 22 is an extremely jaded soul who has been in the great before for thousands of years and has been through every major historical figure without ever having received her final spark that would send her to Earth. She comes off determined to stay in pre-life, claiming that Earth sucks anyway. Joe doesn't care about any of this and uses 22 to try to get back into his body back on Earth so that he can fulfill what he claims is his life's purpose of playing jazz by performing with the band he just got a break with. He doesn't want to die with a wasted life. That's the conceit of this plot in the nutshell. Definitely a Pixar plot with promise, and for the most part the adventure the characters go on is a fun one. Something about the story didn't click with me by the end though, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I want to say that the third act of this movie, while it did have some powerful scenes, ultimately felt like a rushed step down from the rest of the movie that didn't deliver as eloquently on its theme as I would have liked. Without spoiling anything, the ending felt like the convergence of a lot of contrived plot conveniences, all within the span of less than 9 minutes to wrap up the arcs of its two main characters and try and deliver on the film's thematic message. The ending had me thinking more about the rules of the Great Beyond and Great Before than they probably would have liked, but the movie seems to play it very fast and loose with these rules of the universe they set up in order to allow the plot to move forward. Yes, some things are very briefly set up within the first third of the film, and I guess the final act pays off these concepts, but to me it did so in a way that didn't seem to make much sense if really thought about. However, it didn't ruin the movie for me because I knew the movie had to get the two main characters back together somehow. This is honestly hard to talk about without spoiling, but after you see the movie, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. The major letdown I felt with Soul was on the delivery of its message. This was a very philosophical movie tackling the big questions. What is the meaning of life? What makes a person who they are? What is our purpose? That's a lot for any movie, let alone a kid's movie. But the problem is when you invoke these questions as the central theme to your movie, then you're already in trouble because they can't be answered. Ultimately, the film tries to provide an answer, but it is more a symbolic answer, never quite verbalized, and it treaded a fine line between being too simple and silly and being symbolically meaningful. It didn't quite land for me, and I was a bit let down by the movie's unwillingness to take the next step and provide some kind of answer, especially because the thematic revelation they do provide comes so quickly in the last few minutes of the film that it doesn't really have a lot of time to breathe. That also added to the pacing issue I had with the last act. However, this thematic disappointment is something that seems to be a reoccurring problem with more lighthearted media that try and tackle these topics. I had a similar problem with the final season of The Good Place, actually. The endings of these types of stories tend to be letdowns because the writers set out to establish a story where these major questions are asked, but can never answer them themselves, and ultimately just try some symbolic mumbo-jumbo that attempts to be deep and meaningful while at the same time being kinda wishy-washy. I can't blame them. The writers are only human, but I kinda wish they wouldn't fully go into tackling these major questions as deep as they do if they don't really have anything unique or solid to say. Maybe I'm expecting way too much from an animated children's movie. Inside Out really did hit me in the feels, and I think it delivered excellently on a theme in the same vein as Soul, whereas I think Soul just didn't hit the mark as an overall narrative. But the animation is still wonderful, and the character of Joe Gardner is one that I connected with and was happy to be on this existential adventure with. I think Inside Out may have just set the bar really high, and I had my hopes up that Soul would be as good. Unfortunately, it isn't, but that doesn't make Soul a bad movie. Overall, I'd say Soul is a 3.5 out of 5-star film, very solid and a great kids movie for sure, with an important message about pursuing your passion but not letting it consume or define you. That's it for this watchlist review. The next movie on my list is The Lobster, starring Colin Farrell, which I hear is weird, so look forward to that in 2 weeks. But what did you think about Soul? Where does it rank against other Pixar films? Do you like it more or less than Inside Out? Please let me know all that in the comments, and while you're down there, leaving a like on this video would help me out. If you did like this video, hey, look at these other guys on your screen. They could be cool. Thank you so much for watching. It really does mean a lot to me, and until next time, I'll shut up.